It's Paul Hawksbee, Charlie Baker here on talkSPORT, and all the boxing mayhem continues with egg. Is it a gate? Is it a gate?
Egg gate.
I mean, it's not really a gate, is it? It's not quite. I mean, look, eggs basically.
My neighbour sells eggs from their gate, just on a.
Oh, really? That's nice.
With an honesty box, Paul.
Oh, that's a good thing.
Nice, isn't it?
It's doesn't strictly lead us into this chat. Chris Eubank Jr, of course, thrust an egg because it was apparently eggs that affected certain levels of a failed drug in a failed drug test. Well, you know the story anyway. I'm sure you're very much aware of what's gone on. He was making a point. Was Chris Jr. Joining us now, a man who's seen this sort of shenanigans a million times over the years, Gareth A Davies, talkSPORT boxing commentator and presenter of Fight Night. Hi, Gareth.
Hello, Gareth.
Good afternoon, Paul. Good afternoon, Charlie. This is no exaggeration.
Okay, we're all having a go.
To say this is exactly what the promoters. Well, I mean, it's inevitable.
I've done face earth. You can have that one. You can have that one for nothing. So
listen, it's not what the promoters really wanted.
Really?
Is it? Surely it is, Gareth. It gets on every single back page and some front pages. So he's got the fight talked about.
So claimed Eddie Hearn in several interviews.
Eggy Hearn?
Eggy Hearn, yes.
Look, egg boxes, we don't want them, Paul. 8-10-89, we don't want them.
I think what's happened is they're not going to face them off at tomorrow's press conference at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It reminds me of 2012 and David Hay and Derek Chisora, although much more serious in some ways, that was. And they had to have a steel fence between them when they faced off. They're not even going to bother doing that at the glorious home of Tottenham Hotspur. They're just not going to face them off tomorrow. The press conference, here it is, we're seeing it again. Chris Eubank clearly having premeditated the egg slap, the scrambled eggs on Conor Benn's face. But I'll tell you something, it took 4 20-stone men to hold an angry Conor Benn down, didn't it? He is a very strong welterweight, I'll tell you that. And it's kind of swung it back in his favour a little bit. I think that Chris Eubank is the favourite for the good reason that he's been fought at the higher level and he is naturally the bigger man. But that man Ben has got some ire and got some danger in him, and he will be even more dangerous when that first bell sounds on April the 26th.
There were some absolutely nuts allegations flying around from the two of them, a sort of tit-for-tat stuff. Of course, Chris Eubank homed in on the failed drugs test and stuff. But then you've got Conor hitting back, claiming that he owes Neymar $4 million after a game of poker. It's just some mad stuff going on.
It was a very, very lively press conference in Manchester. I was monitoring it from home, exhausted after my Hong Kong and Riyadh travels of the last week for 2 events. But it was highly entertaining. Even Chris Eubank Sr. not wanting to be a part of it. I'm sure he will at some point. And Conor Benn maybe going below the belt and saying, you don't even get on with your father. I've got my father in the team and in the corner. You're the biggest W in the world, if you can add the dots there. There were a few expletives at the press conference. It was highly entertaining. It ended with that giant melee on stage, which obviously grabbed all the headlines. And that's why we're talking about it right now. It's a great bloodline feud. I've just written the cover story for Ring Magazine for next month, and it is Benn and Eubank on the cover. Nigel Benn was on it years ago, I think 1990, hitting a speedball or the big bag, can't remember which. But it's a shame because these two guys are being given massive resonance and massive prominence. And I think it's probably an act that Chris Eubank shouldn't have done, but it's revenge over Clomiphene Gate, isn't it? So that's what he's doing. But he's ignited the promotion. It was a lot of fun anyway. And now they can't dare let Conor Benn near Chris Eubank Jr. because he will definitely fight him, because he looked calm behind the scenes afterwards yesterday. But as soon as he sees Chris Eubank again, he's just going to explode.
How good a fight are we actually expecting in light of everything that's going on with the rehydration clause and the fact it's a catch-weight fight? I mean, what's your expectation for it purely as a boxing match? Well,
it's at middleweight, and, it does mean that Conor Benn's coming up 2 weight divisions naturally. He's not the biggest man. He's got a 5-inch reach disadvantage Chris Eubank is 5'11", nearly 6 foot. He's been in with super middleweights up at 12 stone and handled himself very well against the likes of George Groves. Obviously a fight he lost, but he handled himself very well. He's had wins at super middleweight. I think we're in for a spectacular early start with Conor Benn attacking, but I think the longer the fight goes on, and this is just boxing wisdom really, the bigger man ought to do the job, and the bigger man in every shape and form is Chris Eubank Jr. What he is the older man, and Conor Benn's been fairly inactive over the last 2.5 years since those 2 positive tests for clomiphene have precluded him progressing his career. He's had 2 fights under the Texas license. And in fact, I think he's fighting now under an American license. It's not by the Boxing Board of Control, which is fascinating, which means they're still at a standoff with him over the outcome and details, the meticulous details that everyone went over for 2 years that we all got blue in the face, bored of talking about at times. It's still not resolved in some ways, even though he's been cleared.
Convince me, Gareth, that it's not show business. Convince me that it's not going to be a close fight, the first one, so they have a rematch, the other person wins that one, and they have a third match, and it's a trilogy, and everyone makes 30-40 million quid, and they all go home happy. Convince me it's not that.
Well, you've been around the world a while now. You're not a young man anymore because you know what happens. And that crystal ball may not be too inaccurate, because I could certainly see 2 fights if it isn't a very strong victory for Chris Eubank, and they say, do you know what, he's too big for him, and he was too big for him in the end. Let's move Eubank on to fight Saul Canelo Alvarez, which is being talked about as well. I think Conor Benn will always be too small for Saul Canelo Alvarez, in my view. But you may not be wrong there. Certainly, dependent on the outcome of the first fight, it would not surprise at all if 60,000 get into Spurs. It's a raucous night, a good undercard, and a very good or even controversial 12 rounds. They will certainly roll it back.
Nice one, Gareth. We're here from you Saturday. All the best. Thanks very much.
Gareth.
Lovely. Cheers, gents.
Fight Night returns this weekend. Always a good listen. They always get great guests.
They were great Saturday night. Well, I mean, there was an amazing card, obviously.
You're often post-gig, driving back, aren't you? And you listen to the guys.
They were brilliant. They were brilliant and really brought it to life. And the first fight sounded absolutely incredible. I can't remember who it was now, but they were the first fight of the night on Saturday night.
Which was that? Wasn't Callum Smith?
That one.
Joshua Barazzi.
Incredible. Big fight. Watching the highlights, fantastic. Yeah, brilliant job.
Fight Night returns Saturday evening here on talkSPORT.
Paul Hawksbee and Andy Jacobs, Monday to Friday afternoons 1 till 4 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.